It's late. Someone you love is asleep beside you. The door is shut. The curtains are drawn. And for the first time all day, nobody in the world can see you. Almost every human being who has ever lived would have found this moment unbearable. Not unfamiliar, not uncomfortable, unbearable. For them, a person sleeping alone was a person something had gone badly wrong for. So where did we get the idea that being alone was something to want? Start with the physical reality, because it's stranger than people expect. For almost all of human history, there was no such thing as an interior. No walls, no doors, no rooms, no hallways, no upstairs, nothing anywhere that you could step behind. You lived your entire life inside a band of a few dozen people. And that number gets quoted with far more confidence than it deserves. You'll hear 15 to 50 people repeated as though somebody counted. It's an average pulled from a small stack of ethnographies with enormous variation inside it. The honest version is a few dozen, and it changed with the season and the food. But the size was never the point. The sightlines were. In a camp like this, everyone can see, everyone, all day, every day for life. So if you fought with someone, it was a public event. If you grieved, it was a public event. If you were ill, or frightened, or humiliated, it was a public event. And if you wanted each other, that was a public event too. We're not guessing at any of this. We have the floor plan. On the shore of the Sea of Galilee, there's a site called Ohalo II. It sat underwater for millennia until a drought dropped the lake and exposed it. What they found was a camp from about 23,000 years ago. 6 brush huts, built of branches, still holding their shape. The largest one measures 4.5 meters by 3. That is the size of an ordinary bedroom in an ordinary flat. There's a hearth in the center and bedding laid around the edges. Real bedding, thousands of grass stems, laid down in overlapping bundles. A family slept on that grass, in that ring, around that fire. One room, one fire. Everyone inside arm's reach of everyone else. One way in, and once you're inside, nowhere to be out of sight. Everything a human being did was done in that space, in front of everybody. So how does anybody have a private life in a room like that? They did something we've almost completely forgotten how to do. They built privacy that didn't need any architecture at all. The first tool is timing. Darkness is a room you don't have to build. Past a dying fire, you genuinely cannot see very much. So everything that needed cover moved into the dark. Among the Aka in Central Africa, researchers asked couples about this directly. And the answers were consistent. At night, in the hut, quietly. Not hidden, never hidden. Just unremarked on. The second tool is distance. You walk away from the fire. But not far, because past the firelight is where the things that eat you live. So you go to the exact edge of safety, and not one step further. 15 meters in a moonless night was all the wall anyone needed. The third tool is the clever one. Everybody agrees in advance not to notice. You know exactly what's happening. You behave as though you don't. And that shared agreement does the job a door would do. You already know how to do this, because you do it constantly. You do it in a lift. You do it when a stranger starts crying on public transport. You do it when you can hear your neighbors and pretend you can't. There's no wall in any of those situations. There's only an agreement, and that agreement is older than farming, older than writing, older than walls. Now, here's where the story stops. Being about hardship. In the 1970s, a researcher measured how tightly Juhoansi camps were packed. The density was extraordinary by any modern standard. She went looking for the stress you'd expect from crowding, and didn't find it. Her conclusion was that these people were crowded because they preferred it. They had an entire desert available. They chose to sit shoulder to shoulder. And there's a strange follow-on that researchers only recently measured. When a hunter-gatherer camp grows, people don't pack in tighter. They spread out. Cities do the exact opposite. More people, less room each, which suggests there's a natural amount of crowding humans want, and we passed it. But there's a hard limit to what polite pretending can cover. In the 1950s, an anthropologist lived with the Mbuti in the Ituri forest. He recorded one night that tells you more than any statistic. A young man crept over a sleeping father to reach the man's daughter. The father woke up, and he did not take it outside. He took it to the middle of the camp. He walked around, banging on the roofs of the huts to wake everybody up. Within minutes, the entire settlement was involved in his family's problem. Because in a camp that size, there is no such thing as a private quarrel. Then an old man stepped into the same spot. He gave a single low whistle, the signal used to call for silence on a hunt. And he said that all this noise was giving him a headache. That was it. The argument dissolved. The peacemaker wasn't taking sides. He had relatives on both, so he couldn't. They had a saying for it. A noisy camp is a hungry camp. Noise frightens the game. And Unresolved argument was a food problem. One honest caveat: that anthropologist's later work was heavily criticized, and parts of it don't hold up. So we shouldn't lean on him alone. And happily, we don't need to. Another researcher recorded years of ordinary conversation in Juhoansi camps, and she found that the talk splits cleanly into two different jobs. By day, roughly a third of everything said is complaint, criticism, or gossip. Who took too much? Who didn't share? Who isn't pulling their weight? By night, at the fire, 4/5 of it is stories, not complaints. Stories about people, distant places, the dead, the funny. The same fire, the same people, doing two completely different things. Daylight is where the group keeps you in line. Darkness is where it puts you back together. There were no courts, no police, no managers, no complaints procedure. Your reputation was the entire justice system, and it ran on being watched, which means privacy wasn't only impossible, in a real sense, it was suspicious. Someone who wanted to be unobserved was someone with a reason to be. You couldn't quietly take more than your share, because there was no quietly. Generosity wasn't a virtue anyone had to be taught, it was self-defense. The punishment for taking too much wasn't a fine. It was being left out. And in that world, being left out was not an inconvenience. It was fatal. Now here's the case that turns the whole idea inside out. Some societies built huts. Women stayed in during menstruation. It looks obvious. Seclusion. A private space, finally. An anthropologist counted who was in one of these huts every night for 2 years. And the huts weren't hidden. They were positioned where the whole family could see them. The hut wasn't privacy. It was a public announcement. It broadcast exactly who was and wasn't pregnant, to everyone who cared. A building that looks like a wall to us was working as a billboard for them. Right. Let's do the question. Everybody actually came here for. There were no toilets. There were no outhouses. You walked out of camp to the agreed spot, downwind of everybody. And you were, by any modern standard, entirely visible while you did it. Nobody looked. Nobody followed. Nobody mentioned it afterwards. Same trick as before. The wall was social, not physical. Which is precisely what you're doing in a public bathroom today. You can hear them. They can hear you. And everyone performs the same small lie. And it works perfectly. The lock on that cubicle is recent. The pretending is 100,000 years old. Then there's sleep, which is where this gets genuinely physical. People slept in a pile because at night the temperature dropped hard. Because things hunted after dark. Because the fire had to be kept alive until morning. Warmth and safety came from other bodies, and there was no substitute. Among the Hadza, in the dry season, people sleep outside next to the fire. 2 to 6 people to a fire. Not one person to a room. Researchers monitored their sleep across 20 days. In 20 days, there were about 18 minutes in total when every adult was asleep at once. 18 minutes, out of 20 days. People naturally wake at different hours, and, between them, they cover the night, which means nobody ever had to be the only one awake in the dark. Hold that against a person lying awake alone at 3 in the morning. There's nobody keeping watch, because there's nothing left to keep watch for. But the part of you that's scanning for danger never got the memo, so it finds something else to scan. It runs through your debts, your job, and the thing you said in 2011. Then, about 10,000 years ago, we started farming. Farming means staying put. Staying put means building things, meant to last, and for the first time, a human being could be indoors. A door is a genuinely. It's the first machine ever built for not being seen. But having walls didn't mean having rooms. For thousands of years afterwards, a house was one room and one bed. If you traveled and stopped at an inn, you shared that bed with a stranger. There was published etiquette for it. Lie still. Don't take the blanket. Not intimacy. Warmth, cost, and safety in numbers. The private home you're picturing arrives late, and not for the reason you'd assume. Victorian architects ran corridors through houses so that families and servants would never meet. An 1864 manual lists the qualities of a gentleman's house, and privacy comes first. So, privacy, at the start, was not about being alone with your thoughts. It was about not having to look at the people who worked for you. It took another century, and an enormous amount of new floor space, before everyone got some. So we ran an experiment on ourselves, and nobody designed it or agreed to it. We built the walls. Then, when the walls came down again, we built portable ones. Headphones are a door you can carry. A phone is a room you can open absolutely anywhere. We sit close enough to touch and talk through a screen instead. We invented buildings that put 100 people under one roof and give each a lock. Density without company, the camp layout, with the camp removed. We ended up with more privacy than any humans in history, and we kept optimizing for more. and we replaced the fire with something that looks like it from a distance. You can watch 400 people's lives tonight and speak to none of them. One of those was reciprocal. The other only runs one way. We kept the surveillance. That part scaled beautifully. It's the storytelling half of the fire we misplaced. Now you can go days without being seen by anybody who actually knows you. And it turns out the thing we spent 10,000 years escaping was also holding us up. The fire wasn't only warmth, it was where the day got processed by other people. You didn't carry a hard day home. There was no home to carry it to. It got told and argued over and absorbed by 20 people that night. Now the processing happens inside one's skull, and mostly it doesn't happen. Being watched was the price. Being known was what you bought with it. We kept the escape, and we lost the thing we were escaping from. And the strange part is that the old solution still works. Nobody has to knock a wall down. The camp was never the building. Which brings you back to the room you're sitting in. The door is shut. Nobody can see you. For nearly 300,000 years, that was the definition of something having gone wrong. It took us all of that time to build the door, and about a century to notice we were the only ones behind it.